God didn't create rules so that he could sit up on his throne, handing out judgment and throwing out consequences. He created rules so that he could protect us. It is Monday, and it's time for Monday Message. Growing up in the church, I feel like I learned a lot of the rules, and I struggled a lot with this idea of that Christianity was boring. There were so many things that I couldn't do, or I shouldn't watch, or I shouldn't say. Like, it got to the point I was like, why do I want to be part of this? But it wasn't until I became a parent myself and really started to understand the idea of rules that I realized that God wasn't doing it to punish me or to take things away from me or to steal my joy, but he was doing it to protect me. We have a 2.5-year-old, and we are really starting to come into the time where we have to start making those rules and establishing those boundaries. I don't set a bedtime for her so that she misses out, but it's because it's healthy and what's good for her. She can't play in the road because it's not safe. The rules that my husband and I put in place aren't so that we can be in absolute control and that we can manipulate her life. It's so that we can protect her because we know better. Romans 3:20 reads, "Therefore no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law, we became conscious of sin." Laws and rules help us realize that there are sins and there are consequences. Recently at church, we've been studying the downfall of Adam and Eve. One of the questions that comes up, and a question I had, is why did God even put the tree in the garden if he knew that it would be a temptation? My pastor pointed out that if there's never a chance to disobey, there's never really a chance to obey. God gives us a choice to choose him and to choose to obey him. If we look through the book of Leviticus and we talk about all the rules that were put in place, they were put in place to set us apart, to help us live differently and in a way that is pleasing to God. And ultimately, that's good for us. Just because they were written in the Old Testament does not mean that they don't apply to us today. In fact, Matthew 5:17 and 18, Jesus declares that he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. See, the rules and the laws that he put in place were a way for Jesus to come and fulfill the law. When I was thinking, keep saying that the rules are meant to protect us. And what does that mean? If we look through a lot of the different laws that God put in place, he didn't do it so that we have an absence of fun or an absence of doing what we choose to do. But it truly is for our protection of our hearts, our minds, our soul, our family, our time. One of the best places we can find this biblically is to look at the 10 Commandments in the Old Testament versus the New Testament. I'm going to particularly choose thou shalt not murder. My brother actually did a sermon on this, and that was one of the most incredible things to watch my little brother up on stage. But anyway, in the Old Testament, we can see thou shalt not murder. But in Matthew 22 and 23, Jesus redefines what it looks like to murder. He says it's not just the act of killing people, but it's just even thinking mean things about your brothers and sisters. It's a heart issue. God doesn't tell us to steer away from adultery because he doesn't want you to just sleep with anybody you want to sleep with. He does it because it protects us. He doesn't tell you to give up what the world wants you to do because he wants you to be isolated. He does it because he knows what the world has to offer is not even good for our soul or close to what he can offer. The last thing we have to realize when it comes to rules, though, is it's not us obeying the rules that are going to get us to heaven. I know as Christians, sometimes we can easily brush things off and we're like, okay, well, we're not that bad. We just broke this rule. I don't covet, I just want slightly. Okay, I may have taken this, but I didn't kill somebody, so I'm good. But in fact, that's not the case. James 2:10 tells us that if we commit a sin, then we've committed all the sins. But the good news is, 1 John 1:9 tells us if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just and forgives us of our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. God will forgive us even if we sin. And again, it's not through our own works that we're allowed to be saved. We need God. We as humans cannot live up to the rules and the expectations, but us through God and his forgiveness and his grace can. So much like the rules that you might put in place in your own home or your classroom or your job, they are not to hinder you or to suck the fun out of life. They are to protect you, to build you up, and to help guide you to be an excellent person.